Thank you for joining us today for our coronavirus webinar update for the week. We appreciate you taking the time out of your week to join us. As always, please have your phones, your computers and phones muted during the presentation. Melissa and John will take questions at the end through the chat feature, which is located at the bottom. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to John to kick this off.
Thank you, Hope, and thank you, Melissa, for all your hard work on getting this together today. This is our weekly update webinar, and as a reminder, this is for the use and benefit of the hospitality industry and is off the record. We routinely talk to the press about any issues relative to what's going on, but this session is not designed for the press. So if you're a member of the press, please disconnect and reach out to our office and we'll talk with you separately. And with that, I'm going to welcome everyone and turn it over to Melissa. Melissa's going to call on me a couple of times throughout to chime in, but outside of that, Melissa, it's all yours. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another weekly brain dump. We have a lot of P3 information today and then updates on pretty much everything else. And as always, I will tell you what I know, what I don't know, and what I hope to know sooner than later. So we will jump right into it. The P3, nothing terribly new in terms of changes to the P3. John's going to speak to some legislation on that front. But we did get information as it pertains to what forgiveness looks like, how the SBA will determine forgiveness of the P3 with the loan program. So we have gotten that information finally of how those calculations are going to work. I'm going to talk through some of the things we know. If any of you received the Philadelphia Business Journal, some of this will sound familiar because they did a truly phenomenal breakdown of the P3 forgiveness application. And as you all know, if I can just repeat what somebody else says instead of having to think too hard on my own, I'm all about it. So here's where we are in terms of the P3. Nothing has changed in terms of the 75-25. Nothing's changed in terms of June 30th. All of the things that are keeping you up at night because they make absolutely no sense for our industry have not changed. But we do know some information if you are operating within the current parameters. If things don't change, hopefully they will. That's going to be John in a little bit. We know what they are. So forgiveness is going to be done in a 3-step process. It's going to be based on ensuring that you do not have a reduction in pay for employees more than 25%. As you know, that's step 1. The second is having the same full-time equivalent employees that you had before. That's step 2. And then 3 is using that 75% of it for your payroll cost. So those are the 3 as it pertains to meeting the forgiveness in terms of the payroll piece of it. You will have to provide when you are submitting your application, and this was in our update on Monday, you have to provide information for each employee that you brought back, last 4 digits of their social security number. If you have any employees that are making over that $100,000 threshold, they would be listed separately because you are only able to pay them up to $100,000. And you also need to provide, as you know, the P3 will cover other costs such as health insurance and paid leave and retirement and 401ks. All of that is going to be included in the relief application that you submit. Further, as we've discussed in the past, you need to provide either bank information or your payroll information, basically to check those boxes as it pertains to the 75% of the payroll forgiveness. So that's going, those are the things that you will need to provide within the application. To that end, there was a clarification as it pertains to when you can use your 8-week period. It doesn't let you use it off into the distance, but it does say that you can start your 8 weeks based on your first payroll. It doesn't need to be when you draw on the loan, because a lot of you probably drew on your loan in the middle of payroll, and that can create a logistical nightmare. So they are allowing you to start your forgiveness amount on your first payroll after you receive your loan. Now, you could still use the drawdown date, but it does allow you to pull it down on your first payroll and work it through that process. Further, They did extend some of, you can use it, we're to the 25% now. You can use it, as you know, for rent and for utilities and mortgage interest. They also expanded that to include leases on personal property. So copiers, servers, vehicles can all be included in that 25%. Do I think a lot of you are going to be using that? Probably not, because 25% doesn't amount to a lot, and you're probably using it for your rent and for your mortgage interest. But similarly, that mortgage interest isn't just tied to the business itself. You can use it for other things that you have mortgaged within your business. Utilities, pretty straightforward. It's as we thought. Electricity, gas, water, telephone, or internet are all considered utilities. So those can be part of the forgiveness in that 25% of the utilities. I am not going to get into the weeds on how to determine the full-time equivalent. That is pretty one of the few things that's clear in the application. I will say that despite, and this is, I feel like this is the nature of the P3, because we think we know what they're thinking, and then they release guidance and it's different. We assumed full-time equivalent would be based off of the Affordable Care Act at 30 hours. It is not. There is a formula relating to 40 hours. It's not each employee 40 hours. One option is you can take the average number of hours paid for each employee, divide it by 40, round it to the nearest 10th. And the second would allow you to count any employee who worked 40 hours or more as one employee, and then those who work less as a half of an employee. And I won't get into the weeds. Look at the application. It's all, that's one of the few things that is clear in the application. There are two things that I know a lot of you have been doing and you're allowed to, but I think a key part of this is don't just stop it when the P3 is done. And a lot of you have brought on your independent contractors onto your payroll to meet your employee requirements. That's fine, you bring them onto your payroll, but at the end of 8 weeks, you can't just let them go. The IRS is gonna flag that. Further, I know some people have family members that worked for them and they might not have been on payroll before, and they put them on payroll as part of meeting the employee requirement. That's fine. Don't take them off payroll as soon as the 8 weeks ends. That is something that the IRS is going to flag. So those are kind of the parameters and some cautionary things to keep in mind as you move forward with all of this. Like I said, nothing has been changed to make the P3 any easier outside of the parameters that we know, but there is legislation that is being forgiven or considered now. And I was on a Philadelphia call, which is always fun yesterday, and John was on an update for that. So I will turn it over to John to talk a little bit about what's happening on the federal level and if there's a chance for some people.
Thank you, Melissa. Let me first say, because I neglected to at the outset, that we thank our friends at Dell Technologies for sponsoring the webinar today. Dell's been really good about coming forward and helping not only PRLA, but many hotel associations around the country where they've actually reached out and said, can we help in some way? So that's really nice during this time. So thank you to Dell. So there's been a lot of talk about fixing the PPP, and that's on the program of work for the National Restaurant Association, our partners on the restaurant side, AHLA, our partners on the hotel side. It's part of the ask in the COVID-4 package. But there was a piece of legislation that was dropped on Friday that actually has some real likelihood. By the way, there are many pieces of legislation about fixing the PPP. And I sound like a broken record, but nobody anticipated that they couldn't turn the switch back on June 30th when they created this program. Now everyone knows that's the case, and they recognize this program needs to be fixed, especially for our industry. So there's a piece of legislation that was dropped on Friday by Representative Chip Roy of Texas and Dean Phillips of Minnesota. And what makes this significant is that the speaker promised Representative Phillips a straight up and down vote on this bill. It's a very simple bill. It's not, there's nothing in it that should be controversial. The president in his restaurant roundtable the other day acknowledged that there should be some fixes to the PPP. So it would seem like he would be supportive of it if it gets to his desk. We can't guarantee it's going to happen, but it probably has as much chance as anything. So watch this as you hear more from us about it, particularly if we get into an action alert. But here are the key provisions. It changes if it becomes a loan, it changes it from a 2-year loan to a 5-year loan. The covered period gets extended 24 weeks from the time that the loan is taken, which is huge. Right now it's 8 weeks. It's huge for a couple of reasons. One, that's the period that you can use the money, but it's also the period that the test period for getting employees back to full headcount in order for forgiveness. And the loan forgiveness feature on the employee part cannot be reduced if rehires decline offers or similarly qualified employees cannot be found. There's enough wiggle room in this that I think that could be a really big deal as far as trying to get your loan forgiveness due to bringing folks back to work. And then another potentially big one is it eliminates the 75-25 threshold. The same types of uses would be required, the 4 uses that we all are very familiar with at this point in time: mortgage interest, rent, utilities, or payroll. But the 75% to be spent on payroll would no longer be required. It also delays the payment of employer payroll taxes. So this would be good. I've had a couple of questions since this came out. So, well, what about me? I took a PPP. I've used all the money. I've used it exactly the way it was supposed to be used. It seems like this benefits those that haven't used it properly. That's true, except for the part about the head count. The head count would be beneficial to everyone if you haven't been able to get back up to count yet. So, and this would be beneficial to a lot of folks who haven't used the money yet. So this is what the piece of legislation is. Melissa will be, and our friends at the National Restaurant Association will be following very closely as it gets to the point of a vote. According to Congressman Roy's chief of staff, it could be as early as this week. We'll see. But that's one piece of legislation that provides some additional hope on the PPP. All of that said, do exactly what Melissa's been saying about the regulations, because that's what's actually in place right now. So with that, Melissa, I'll turn it back to you.
John, I'll ask a question. Was there discussion on the Senate? Is the Senate open to this legislation and passing it?
According to Aaron Frazier at the National Restaurant Association, we are hearing there's good support in the Senate as well as strong bipartisan House vote that'll help push it over the edge there too.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, and that speaks a little bit, I think, to Congress generally. Outside of that, the House did pass the HEROES Act. The Senate will not act on it in its current form. Last week's update, I talked a little bit about what's included in that legislation. We do expect a COVID recovery package, another recovery package to come our way, but it continues to be that disagreement between the House and the Senate in terms of how much money should be used, where it should be going. Should unemployment be extended? Should the $600 be extended? Should cities and counties and states be getting more support? None of that has really been resolved in the grand scheme of the funding mechanisms that are needed. So we hope to have that information shortly, but as John said, the P3, many of you are going to hit your 8 weeks within potentially 2 to 3 weeks. So until that legislation moves, which of course we hope it does and we'll be pushing for, you really do need to follow the guidelines, because your loan will not be forgiven unless you check those boxes that were put out there. To that end, I started saying it 2 weeks ago, and I'm still going to say it. Treasury is saying that they are going to change some of the rules for restaurants. Clearly, we have legislation. It would be easier if Treasury would just do it. They haven't yet. But short term, an easier fix would be for Treasury to make some adjustments, which they continue to say they will do, but they haven't yet. So those are 2 pieces that we're really looking at in terms of that loan forgiveness amount. All right, let's go to state, because I hate federal and I'd rather talk about state things, even if state's a little bit of a hot mess right now. Not all of that much has changed in terms of the reopening. We do have some more counties that are going to be reopening this Friday, or at midnight on Friday. But we expect, the governor every week has been announcing new counties to move into the yellow stage of reopening. The pressure continues to build. We continue to see legislation now gaining bipartisan support, because the legislature doesn't always think that he is moving as quickly as their constituents want. So we're continuing to see that in terms of all different types of legislation. But red to yellow is slowly but surely continuing to happen. We do expect further guidance coming out. We were told last week, we do expect it this week. I know for many of our lodging properties, you want to open your pools because, again, today it's still a little chilly, but it is going to get warm. We are expecting guidance from the state. The state has provided no guidance as it pertains to pool openings, whether in yellow you are capped at 25 people, whether you can use social distancing and have more people. We anticipate that this week. It will be in our update as soon as we hear on that front. To that end, PLCB, during my update last week, the LCB doubled down in terms of outdoor dining. They released an additional advisory essentially saying that you cannot have outdoor dining if you have a liquor license. Further, you can't even allow people to sit in the parking lot in an unlicensed area of your property to dine. So they doubled down and said, everything that a business cannot do in red, they cannot do in yellow. We are working with the governor's office in terms of allowing outdoor dining in yellow. We certainly hope that it's going to happen soon, but as of right now, you will get cited by, if not your local police or the state police, you will get cited in terms of LCE, revenue, and other entities as it pertains to your state license. So please be careful. I've been asked in the past if there is legal protections we can offer employees or employers who decide to open. Every lawsuit that has been filed to try and force the reopening and try and allow for reopening, that lawsuit has failed. So the governor really has unilateral control, and there isn't all that much we can do outside of encouraging him to allow the reopening process to happen if somebody operates and gets cited. So please be cognizant of that. As we all know, you're frustrated. John and I are equally, possibly, if not more frustrated than all of you, but please be careful if you're planning to move forward, especially if you have a liquor license. A lot of questions I have been getting in terms of yellow, and I'll reiterate again. In red, no gatherings whatsoever. Stay at home order. You shouldn't be leaving your home. In yellow, restaurants can still not operate. You can only do takeout and delivery. We've gotten a number of questions from hotels. Here's where you're stuck as a hotel in yellow as we know it on this day. People can gather as long as you don't have people gathering in a group larger than 25. You can't have people gathering in groups larger than 25. That's one piece. The second piece is that you still cannot offer any service. There can be no food and beverage service by a hotel in yellow. So I know a lot of you have groups that want to come in, and if they're in group less than 25, that's certainly something you can consider. But the ban on service continues to apply. Now, if you put boxed lunches sitting outside of your restaurant and people go and pick it up and sit down, that's something that possibly could be allowed. But in terms of serving people, even to an extent of offering water, having people come in and putting water out, that's risky because of the ban on service in yellow. That's yellow, and that applies to everything. That even applies, like a curse word now, in terms of weddings. If you have a wedding, it has to be less than 25 people, and food and beverage service is not permitted in the yellow stage. That's where we are. I know it's frustrating, but that is where we are. Yellow to green. All of us would love to know what the magical parameters are going to be to go from yellow to green. Would love it. We have been told, and Secretary Levine mentioned on Friday of last week when she was asked, that they had not even started putting together what the parameters of yellow to green are, which I know for those of you that will be yellow for 2 weeks coming on Friday is frustrating. She did state that they were going to look at what those parameters were going to be this week. We're hopeful that there will be some kind of announcement of what the standards will be to go from yellow to green. There is some rumors circulating that nobody will go to green until all counties are in yellow. That is not true. The governor and the secretary have debunked that and said that is not a standard that they're looking at in terms of moving from yellow to green. But in terms, and I know every day, John and I get these emails, we don't know what indoor dining is going to be in green. We do not know what the congregating, the 25 in yellow, what that's going to increase to in green. We do not know if large parks, amusement parks, and large gatherings can operate fully in green. We would love to tell you, we just don't know, and we're certainly hoping that we will get that guidance shortly so that you know what standards are going to need to be met as we move into that next phase of reopening. We do have, in addition to all of the work in terms of communicating with the governor's office, and they have been very responsive to us, there is 2 pieces of legislation that passed the House this week, just yesterday. House Bill 2506 allows for outdoor dining. House Bill 2513 allows for 50% occupancy within restaurants. Those bills were amended to include breweries, wineries, and distilleries, and brew pubs. They passed with one, 2506 had a little bit more bipartisan support. 2513 picked up some votes. They are now over in the Senate. To that end, we do not know exactly when the Senate is going to reconvene. So these are, we've seen this, and you've heard about it in the news. You just open up a news story. This is just really the Republican legislature expressing their frustration in terms of the reopening process. So they are basically saying, if we don't know what the rules are, we're going to attempt and create our own rules as it pertains to legislation. But those items are moving through the legislative process, and we do expect the Senate to consider them when they return to session. Short-term goal, of course, is to continue to work with the governor's office to allow all of these items by coordinating with him, as opposed to having to pursue a legislative approach. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to refresh this page again because I'm super stalking as it pertains to House Bill 327. State of the legislature. The House is in session today. They will be back again next week. The House is coming into session literally every week, just passing bills, tons of bills. And then they get over to the Senate, and the Senate's kind of consolidating them. It's just getting nasty at this point. I mean, in terms of the frustration on all fronts, you have legislators who have constituents, all of you, that are very frustrated, and they're trying to respond to that. So there's a lot of fighting and infighting in the Capitol right now. Legislation is moving, but to that end, without the governor being on board, he's going to veto things. And he has the power to do that. He is the governor. So those conversations are continuing. A budget, I talked about the budget, I think, a little bit last week. That is going to hopefully be passed before the end of June. And like I said, we do not expect a full year budget just because the revenues are so terrible. But we will be working through all of that. And it will be interesting to see how budget negotiations go, especially with all the frustrations that are in the Capitol right now. House Bill 327. It has not been signed yet. I know there were articles saying that it was signed, and I, more than any of you, wanted it to be signed yesterday. It has not been signed yet. I just checked again. I'm going to check again now because I'm literally so paranoid about this. Nope, still not signed. We believe it will be signed today by the governor. And as you all know, it will be effective immediately upon his signature. So please prepare, watch our social media. That we're going to tell you immediately on social media. It will be in the ledge update if he signs it today. To that end, we believe it will be signed today. We have been hinted to that it will be signed today. Technically, don't yell. He has until the 28th. We don't think he is going to go until the 28th. We believe it is going to be this week. If I need to march with a sign in front of his house in York County to get him to sign it sooner, I am willing to do so. So we do believe, like I said, it will be signed today. Don't believe the news until you hear it from us. So please keep an eye out, like I said, on social media. To that end, PRLA tools. If you go to prla.org/cocktails-to-go, we have an infographic on there that goes into some of the things that you need to know, the things that you need to follow. This is not a free-for-all, and the LCE is enforcing. And if you are selling cocktails right now, LCE is enforcing. So please don't ruin your chances of selling mixed drinks to go because you jumped the gun a little bit. So please be careful in that sphere. Also on our PRLA.org/cocktails to go is a notice that you need to post. Every business that does this has to post a notice informing people who are getting it that it is considered an open container. They cannot drink it in their car. I don't know why we need to do that, but we do. So, well, people should know not to drink it in their car, but we need to remind them not to drink the margarita in the car. Also, on House Bill 327, the LCB will be releasing additional guidance on it, kind of more in the weeds that we usually get when legislation is passed. We have been working closely with them on that. It has been great. They've reached out and asked for our feedback on how things should look. I will say to all of you, and I said it last week, but I'll reiterate it again, you cannot deliver drinks to go, even if you have a transporter for hire license. It is just like a wine expanded permit. Those drinks cannot be delivered. People have to come. They can come to the curb. You can bring it out. They can run in and pick up the drink. All of that is allowed, but you cannot do delivery. And further, I've gotten this question before. You cannot take a Smirnoff bottle and squeeze some lime in it and then put the top back on and hand it over. That is actually a federal violation in terms of TTB and labeling. So you cannot do that as well. You need to put it in a separate vessel that is not the original bottle, because that would have been tampered with. So please check out last week's webinar. If you didn't see it, I did a deep dive into what is in the bill, and the LCB guidance, as soon as it's available, that will be included in our daily update. But at minimum, please check out the infographic and make sure that you are following the rules as it pertains to the mixed drinks to go. Outdoor dining, I think I've seen a few questions that have come through on this piece. There is a second part of outdoor dining that John and I are working on as it pertains to expanding your licensed premise. Nothing officially has been determined yet, but once again, we are working with the LCB, and I can tell you generally the parameters that we're looking at. We are looking to do an extension of premise. For those of you that might want to extend to your parking lot, you might want to extend further out onto the sidewalk. The goal is for you not currently, for those of you who are the liquor nerd like I am, you need to apply. There's a fee to apply. You have to put up a sign for 30 days. And then if nobody complains that you're extending your license, then you're allowed to do so. We are looking and working with the LCB to do an auto approval of that at no fee, because it would be temporary that you would be extending your license premise. So you would be submitting what you would be extending to. It would be approved automatically. You would still need to put up the sign, because if somebody does appeal or does have an issue with it, they are still able to do that. But as opposed to waiting for the 30 days to make sure nobody does, we're looking at an automatic approval. This is not official at this point in time. These are all conversations that we're having, but it certainly seems like within the LCB and the governor's office, they want to be helpful in terms of creating that additional outdoor space for all of you. To that end, the more tricky of the pieces is for those of you that are looking to shut down streets and roadways to really expand out into that, and potentially having multiple liquor licenses expanding into that. We are working with the LCB on how that looks. I cannot say that we have an answer on that yet, but what you should be doing now is, if you are looking to go into a regular thoroughfare, if you are looking to get creative in terms of shutting down some streets to expand your dining, please start having those conversations with your business improvement districts, with your municipal leaders. You're going to need that buy-in no matter what. No matter what the LCB does, you're going to need that buy-in. So if that's something that you're looking to get creative with, please start having those conversations. And once outdoor dining is allowed, that will make it move much more smoothly and quicker for you to start using those outdoor spaces. So those are conversations, like I said, start having now, understanding that nothing, no rules, no regs, nothing has been made available yet. We're working on it, and those will be available as soon as we achieve the outdoor dining space. And I believe that is the end of this moment's brain dump, and I'm going to turn it over to John or Hope for some upcoming webinars and other things.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk about some other things and then let Hope talk about the webinars. I wanted to point out that in yesterday's update, we published, and thanks to Steph Otterson, who did a great job in the midst of everything else that we're trying to get done right now, to publish this edition of the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association's Restaurant and Lodging Matters, which is our quarterly magazine. You might say, well, why do that in the middle of the pandemic? I think you're going to find a lot of really interesting information in there, and helpful information, in particular about this COVID-19 situation that we're in now. So if you did not, the magazine is available on our website, and the link to it was put out last night. We're very pleased to get a exclusive article from John Hamburger, who's one of the foremost restaurant industry experts, with some very good advice to surviving the pandemic, and also from Mark Woodworth from the lodging side to talk about the future of the lodging industry. And then there's a lot of other real good tools in there. So make sure you check out the PRLA Restaurant and Lodging Matters that was published yesterday. And with that, I'll let Hope talk about some of the webinars.
Great, thank you, John. Tomorrow we are going to have Food Shelter doing a webinar for us to talk a little bit with the industry about how you could be working with your social media, your social channels, and your PR during COVID to get your customers back in the doors when we do reopen. So understanding what you guys are doing, highlighting some of the takeout food, maybe highlighting, they'll just be talking about things you can be doing to start gearing up for reopening. And then next week we have Family First Coronavirus Response Act. So we are going to have the Department of Wage and Labor. They're going to do a webinar starting at 10 a.m. on Tuesday to talk to you more about this Family First Act and about what you should be thinking about when you're starting to reopen and how it will affect your business and things you should be considering. It'll be question and answers. You can talk with them about anything you're concerned about, and they're going to be presenting some really great information there. Melissa will be back next Wednesday. And then on Thursday, this is a new webinar that I just got today. This foundation works with behavioral health and resources for the industry, and they are going to be bringing on 2 psychiatrists on this webinar to talk with the industry, employees, you as owners about your health, mental health techniques you could be doing to help yourself during this process, and just some of the resources that are out there for the industry if anyone is struggling at this time. So I think it'll be a really great webinar. It will be a private webinar. You will need to, you won't be able to just jump on that same day. So you will need to register. Once we have that link, we'll have that up there for you to access. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the next slide. John, do you want to talk about this, or do you want me to cover this?
I'm happy to do it. As you know, we've had the HARP, which is the Hospitality Assistance Relief for Pennsylvania, and it's to help displaced hospitality employees that we've been working on since this started. Raised last count, Hope knows the exact amount, but it's over $100,000, and about ready to process the first tranche of grants. We got a really good boost from Yingling and Philly's all-star pitcher Nola yesterday, and there's a lot of news about it. So if you haven't seen it, please share the news through your social media channels. They're sponsoring an auction for 1 month, and all the proceeds will support HARP. So we're really excited about that relationship, and that Yingling, the work that they've done to set that up along with the Phillies. So that's very exciting. Carryout PA, you're very familiar with now. We get more and more press on this, more and more people going to it to use it as their source to order carryout. Almost every article right now, no matter who's being interviewed about the restaurant industry, they say make sure you go to carryoutpa.com. About half the restaurants in the state are offering carryout or delivery now. So it's very important. And lastly, we have the operational resource page to help you find things as we get reopened. You're going to need things like face shields, face masks, face coverings, potentially thermometers, and other guidance. And then barriers, plexiglass barriers, those kind of things. So if you also have sources on those and you send those to Heidi, she'll make sure that we get them on our business resource page as well. So with that, Hope or Melissa, I'll turn it back to one of you.
Can I add one more thing regarding the HARP HARP fund. Stratus Lounge, which is with Kimpton, has been doing some great DJ events every week. They're on Thursdays, and we will have the information out on our social media today and tomorrow. Their DJs from their Stratus Lounges get on for about 2 hours on Thursday night, and there is a text to donate code there, and they are working with us to raise funds on that front too. So please check it out. I did last week, and it was really cool to see the DJs there and see all the comments coming through. It's on their Instagram page, and we will share that information through our channels. And with that, Melissa, I think you have some questions.
Indeed, I do. All right, let me work through these. Some of these are P3 questions, John, so I might ship them to you since you have the latest information. We do have the question about pools. Like I said, we have not gotten official guidance yet on pools. I was told yesterday it will be this week. That's what I was told. So hopefully it will be this week. I have, while in the yellow phase, we have a 100-person group that wants to have their meetings, and we would like to host the meeting. Do you know if there is risk with the state? I'm hearing of other hotels having larger groups by June. Yellow's 25. That's the state. So while you might have a friendly, police or a friendly DA, with that being said, the governor has sent notices to DAs that said they aren't going to enforce. I can tell you that they're saying 25. I can't tell you if you're going to get a warning or if they're going to come and shut you down. I can't speak to that. I can only say that if it's more than 25, they consider that not able to happen, and you run a risk in doing so. Let's see. The NRA and industry execs had a roundtable with President Trump on Monday regarding the P3 in the restaurant industry. That's correct. I would agree there needs to be a technical correction regarding the 8-week period and full-time employee equivalent. Restaurants are not allowed dine-in service in their yellow phase. How does the SBA and Congress expect full-service restaurants to meet the FTE requirements? Oh, can you mute?
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Expect the full-service restaurants to meet the FTE requirement by the end of the 8-week period, when we are not currently employing a majority of our tip-earning staff that logs a majority of hours. That, Jean, might be more of a comment, but we agree. And John, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, just briefly, because if you watch the replay of the President's Roundtable, which we had on our website, or if you watched it live, the group that was there, there was National Restaurant Association folks there, and there were Independent Restaurant Coalition folks there. They were all pretty much lockstep in the idea that the most important thing is to expand the covered period for 24 weeks on the PPP. And the president turned to the Secretary Mnuchin and said, Secretary, can we get that done? And he said, well, we can work on that. So that's positive, but I don't think that's a technical correction. I think that's a legislative correction. And I understand that the Secretary has reached out to folks in the legislature already to talk about this. Potentially Congressman Roy, I don't know that for a fact, but that was covered in the NRA briefing the other day. So yeah, they're working toward getting that done. And you're right, not just us and the people on this call believe that correction needs to be made, but everybody we've talked to believes that, because this pandemic is different than anybody expected. All of that said, it doesn't mean it's going to be done. I mean, there's a lot of things that shouldn't be done by Congress that are not done. But I think that has to be done in legislative. Melissa may know better than me. There's a lot of technical corrections that could be made, administrative corrections the Treasury's tried to make. I'm not sure this is one of them, but either way, there's legislation out there that would do this.
Yes, it would need a legislative push to go beyond the June 30th. Another one about the meeting with Trump and the National Restaurant Association, that the NRA did ask the deadline to be extended from August to end of October. John just spoke to that. That's the 24 weeks. So that is a part of the discussion in terms of P3 changes. Any update on the Main Street lending program from Department of Treasury? I have not heard an update. Doesn't mean there isn't one. We can look into that. Also in New Jersey, a hospitality fund of up to $100 million was passed in the House and Senate strictly for the hospitality for businesses doing under $2 million any way we can get that in PA for hotels and restaurants. We are working on, there's legislation right now that's moving, and there's also CARES Act funding that we are looking at to create a potential fund like that in Pennsylvania. Very preliminary discussions in terms of getting an agreement between the House, the Senate, and the governor about how those funds should be used. But I am in ongoing calls about that and potentially using some of that funding in Pennsylvania, and we hope to have an update on that shortly. Has there been any word on any safe harbor legislation and the correspondence that was collectively sent from the many tourism associations on May 11th? There has not, on the federal level, safe harbor legislation has not passed yet. It's being considered as part of the next package. Nothing on the federal level. State level, nothing has been passed yet either. We are continuing to push for it. And as I mentioned last week, we recognize that this is going to be important for all of you as it comes to reopening, is that safe harbor legislation. So we hope to have information on that sooner than later. Can we serve food in the yellow zone at a bed and breakfast because we are under 25? You can do, I mean, you can have people pick up, but you can't have, I would say you cannot have sit down service at a bed and breakfast, but it probably also relates to the type of license that you have as well. If you have like a license from ag, then I would say that the ag rules would apply to you. So it probably depends on your bed and breakfast and the type of licensing that you have. That might be a question to chip over to DCED though and get their opinion. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one.
I think that if you're in a controlled dining area that you control, you're going to have issues with that. I think on the other hand, if people wander off and go out, sit by a fire pit or something like that, I think you're going to have a lot better defense on it. It's definitely a gray area. Obviously, when Melissa hesitates to answer something, it's a gray area because she knows all this stuff.
There's so many more gray areas than I want there to be. So many.
Question.
But, oh, I'm so,
Go ahead.
Hi, Chris Pittenger, Cunningham, Pennsylvania. Quick question. I'm sorry if you covered this. I don't know. Hi, and I'm sorry I can't figure out how to email or text a question. But real quick, and I may have missed this because I joined late. But the on the PPP, that the issues I have with the PPP are we're open for takeout only, and so I've only brought 2 of about 11 employees back, and we have a PPP loan. But the question is that full-time equivalent, which I think a person mentioned. Sorry, I didn't catch your name there. Is this an on-off switch in terms of reduction? Because the conflict is people are making more money with the $600 overlay than they would be here on an ordinary day. Yeah. So they're not coming back, and I don't need them anyway. I mean, you can only polish the floor so many times.
Chris, when did you receive the money?
About 10 days.
Okay.
May 14th. May 14th.
Yeah, watch the legislation. We talked about legislation earlier that at a federal level by Representatives Roy and Phillips, of Texas, Phillips of Minnesota, because this would help you with that FTE. But the problem is that you're going to run up against a timeline, and we can't advise that you do nothing in the meantime. You have a little bit of time left, though, and they're supposed to have an up and down vote on this week. And there may be there's a strong bipartisan support. The Senate seems inclined to consider it too. That could help you. But it's the I don't have a bill number, but it's by Chip Roy and Dean Phillips, and you'll see it in our updates too. That gives you some relief if you try to bring employees back and they won't come back.
Well, but the problem is that if this is an on or off, I mean, if I don't spend the money, I'll give it back. But the question is, are they going to say, well, no, the money you did spend on employees, you have to pay that back too. And you know, it's a bit of a catch-22 in terms of I don't want to dig myself into a hole, whereas otherwise I would have just not done a community service, not open for takeout, let people stay on unemployment.
Yeah.
And then, so am I digging myself a hole is the question.
It's hard to say. And what I think both Melissa and I would tell you is that everybody we've talked with agrees this is an issue, and there's a groundswell to fix it. But that doesn't necessarily mean Congress gets it fixed. And Chip, Chris, if you want to talk about the specifics of your case, I can't give you advice, but I can help you look at it from two sides. You're welcome to call me at any time. If you call that number on the screen, you can ask for my cell phone. It'll flip you right over to my cell phone. Okay.
Well, that'd be great because I don't want to take up everybody's time.
No, I'm happy to help in any way that we can. Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Okay. So let's continue with some questions. I've seen people sitting at 6 feet distance outdoor cafe tables, sipping Cokes or water while they wait for their takeout food. Is this allowed in yellow? If it's a licensed property, it's risky. But if they're just waiting for their food and they're 6 feet apart, that would be fine. It's the consumption of food and beverage that dings you in yellow. So if people are waiting for their food now, in Philadelphia, you can't do that. As you all know, Philadelphia is special. You cannot wait for your food in Philadelphia. You need to order it ahead of time, and then if it's not quite ready when you get there, you can wait, but you cannot order it and wait while it's being prepared. So people are sitting and waiting for their food and sipping from a Coke or water that they did not purchase from the licensed premise. That would be permissible. Otherwise, it is risky in terms of the LCE enforcement provisions. For House Bill 2506 and 2513, if they pass, would that include banquet areas too for catered events, or is it specifically for restaurants? The definition is broader than just restaurants, but the legislation doesn't speak to the 25 congregating in a space. So you would still have to do social distancing for anything higher than 25 in yellow. So it could be included for that, but it doesn't change the 25 without social distancing. It just requires you would have to have social distancing for more than 25, which probably isn't exactly feasible. So it doesn't speak to that specifically. With that being said, our hope and John's hard work is working with the governor's office to get this taken care of by making reasonable adjustments and regulations with their office. So 2506 is broad. It's not as specific as actual regulations need to be. All of that would be hammered out with the governor's office. John, do you have anything to add there?
I don't.
Okay.
Thank you.
In House Bill 2506, adjacent property have to be part of the business, or can it be a neighboring business or public property? That, if you are extending your license into another person's business, that would be tricky. You would need their permission, obviously, if you're going to extend into somebody else's parking lot, if you're going to extend your premise into that. So it's not unreasonable or unfeasible, but you would need their permission, obviously, to do something like that. So like I said, 2506 is just kind of language, and then if it passes and it's signed, rules need to be made up from that point. But like I said, to that extent, our hope, of course, is that we would get this resolved without needing legislation, and that's how we are moving forward. But outdoor dining via rooftop, if they offered sit-down meal service, I don't see why it couldn't be. I mean, the whole point of outdoor dining is the air and the ability to social distance. You would have to meet all the requirements of social distancing, but I do not believe that there would be a ban on rooftop dining in that scenario. But it couldn't be an enclosed rooftop dining area. For planning purposes, hi Michael, have had several questions asked to me. Is it known when it comes to table spacing? Do you expect that space between just the tables or between chairs at the tables, meaning back-to-back aisles between seated guests? John, do you want to speak to this, or I don't know if this is part of your conversations you've been having?
Yeah, we're supposed to get some proposed standards over the next couple of days that we'll have a chance to at least weigh in on, whether we get a lot of feedback or not, I don't know. The examples we've given them would be fairly flexible in administering it, and they're going to have to do with probably physical distancing between people, not necessarily between tables or chairs. And that would not be between people at the same table, but people at separate tables. So what we're trying to do, and what we've been working from, and Bob later on offered some opinions on this too, and we appreciate that, Bob. We've been working from a number of different state standards. We have a lot of them available. The one that seems to be the best thought out, the most flexible and yet safe is Ohio, and that's the one we've been kind of working from, and that's how they do theirs. So I don't know, it's anybody's guess right now, Michael, where we actually end up, but we're trying to get it to be as flexible as possible and yet safe.
So next question, we have some commentary about open containers. Yes, apparently we do have to remind consumers not to do shots on their way home. So apparently the LCB thinks that we do, or the legislature does at least. Should we file an extension of premise for the auto approval process to be implemented, or should we be proactive and file immediately? I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that in my preliminary discussions with the LCB, we've talked about telling people to wait to file, because filing right now comes at a cost. The temporary extension would be at no cost. That's what we're going towards. So it would make more sense for you to wait until we can get this temporary information out there. Because like I said, it'll be automatically approved. And if you do it the old-fashioned way, I don't know how quickly the LCB is going to be able to go through the queue and pull those people out who applied before the new rules were put out there. So I would suggest you not extend your premise until we know what outdoor dining looks like and if there will be the ability for that temporary extension of premise. The client has a 250-person wedding in October, and the guidance on large gatherings in the green phase is unclear. How likely is it this wedding can proceed? I can't answer any wedding questions anymore. So I know, people who know me know that when I give opinions and people don't like the answer, they get very upset with me. So I don't know. We don't know what 250, if 250 is going to be allowed in green or not. It's going to be the governor, it's going to be the Department of Health, and it's going to be the CDC. We don't know, and I cannot advise anyone to cancel, postpone, or anything with their wedding until we know. So sorry, I can't give a clear answer. As soon as we know what green is, we will let you know. I'm concerned that businesses will be vilified for patrons' misbehavior. Other states that manage to get drinks to go past have seen drinking and public consumption. It would be great if PRLA can work on a messaging campaign. If we're all in this together, customers have a role. Support your restaurants by following the rules. That is a very valid point. And like I said, we have seen some municipalities. I know Wrightsville down in York County actually has suspended the open container laws to allow people to drink within parks and things like that. But yes, this is all going to be a combination of responsible behavior, municipal enforcement, and the restaurant in and of itself. Now, everyone's been able to sell beer to go for forever. With a WEP, you can sell wine to go. I know spirits are a slightly higher alcohol level, but to the same extent, I mean, that responsible behavior has been assumed and should be assumed no matter what the rules and regulations are in terms of expansion. Mayor Peduto stated on the news last night they're working with 6 communities to close streets for outdoor dining. He said that this could take a month. Is that an indication that Pittsburgh restaurants will still be closed for indoor dining for another month? God, we all hope not. I mean, we don't know. We believe that indoor dining will be included in green. It kind of has to be, but we don't know the parameters for green. So we cannot predict. We would certainly think that indoor dining would be permitted within a month. For counties that are in yellow, we would expect that you would flip to green. But like I've said before, we don't know what green is. And feel free to reach out to the governor's office and ask them. We're hoping to get information this week. But we just don't know. So I don't know if you could say that his comments are specifically related to when indoor would be allowed, especially since we don't have that information from the governor or Department of Health yet. Any timeline for malls to be reopening? Are they included in the yellow phase? Malls in and of themselves are not included in yellow. Now, if there is a business in the mall that has outdoor access outside of the mall access, they can reopen, but malls are required to remain closed during the yellow phase. Is it your understanding in yellow that in-house hotel guests can order their takeout food and or drink from the hotel restaurant, and then they can eat that food in any of the hotel common spaces rather than in their room and outside on property if that space is permitted by LCB? We are looking for clarification on this. The problem is that the LCB provided guidance specific to restaurants without recognizing kind of the nature of hotels, and we are looking for that. We believe and we hope that in the yellow phase, if people are congregating in a common area, even though the hotel itself is licensed, that would be permissible, especially on the 25 rule. And we believe that is how the LCE would enforce it, but we are checking with the LCE to determine how they would interpret that for hotels. So please stand by on that front for yellow phase. Red phase, no dice. No one can eat or congregate anywhere in the common areas of the hotel. Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Bhavesh, for the thank yous. Wanted to make sure everyone saw a new requirement, actually, in PA issued by the governor for unemployment 1609 form that employees have to give to all separated employees. Our TPA reached out to the unemployment office hoping it was only those discharged, but they said no, all voluntary or involuntary. It also applies to reduction of hours. Yes, you did receive a notification from the unemployment office about information you need to provide to your employees. That is part of legislation that was passed the other month. So if you receive that notification, you do need to provide that information to employees. To another unemployment item that has come up because the unemployment office sent this out. There is, in Pennsylvania, you can only get 26 weeks of unemployment compensation. Part of the CARES Act increased that to 39 weeks. That does not change the $600. The $600 still expires at the end of July. So we're not adding 13 weeks at $600 a pop, but it does expand the ability to collect unemployment for people who might still be collecting. So this doesn't really change anything other than if somebody's on unemployment, it can go to 39 weeks. The $600 doesn't go for 39 weeks. That does, as of this moment, expire at the end of July. So if a client is having an event at their home of 25 or more for their weddings, what is the guidelines for this? Are there guidelines for a drop for food? These are things that you really have to reach out to your health department or DCED. Catering is a tough nut at this point. So like I said, I tend to tell you what I think it is. I can't tell you what exactly it is. So for those questions, a home of if 25 or more, even at a home, that's a violation in yellow. I mean, 25 is congregating of any kind. So if you are providing food in that space, which technically you're not allowed to do because you're not allowed to provide service of food, they need to be careful in that. Like I said, I'm not cops, I'm not enforcing it. I can only tell you what is put in the information. Can you host multiple groups of 25 if you break them up into different halls and large venues like an expo or convention center? We had this question last week. We believe that if they're in separate rooms, that might be permissible. But to say you can have 100 people in a convention floor space, we haven't gotten permission that would be permissible. 25 is the number in terms of that. So if they're in different rooms and there's less than 25 in each room, we believe that would meet the standard of the 25 congregating. Are there any studies that the PRLA and or the state uses on contact time of customers in a setting? We want to show contact time in a fine dining setting is much less than the contact one gets during grocery shopping. Will this type of knowledge help us get open faster with the state as they write green phase? Is there a PRLA study presentation on neighboring states opening parameters that you're using with the state? Do you need help writing one? John, take it away.
Yeah, Bob, I mentioned the second part of the question. Then yes, we have the opening standards that we're working with, and we've gathered a lot of those and tried to consolidate them into the best ones. Plus, we've created some of our own. And relative to your first question, I will say you have the best questions. And I appreciate that. I have no idea about that, but it's something that we should look at. Makes a lot of sense. And maybe we'll talk about that offline. And also, Bob, thank you for getting us the YouTube video so quickly of the president's roundtable. You're amazing how fast you get those things to us. So thank you for that.
Okay. Can food trucks serve takeout and any restrictions for them that you heard of? Food trucks are allowed to operate in the state of Pennsylvania unless, you guessed it, you're in Philadelphia. Philadelphia does not permit food trucks, but food trucks are permitted. If you go on the Department of Ag site, there are standards that food trucks need to make. They social distancing, sanitizing, really all the things that restaurants need to do, but they are permitted in Pennsylvania except in Philadelphia. And thank you, Carl, for another thank you. Is there a way to develop guidelines specific to outdoor wedding venues? We have so much more space. We do have a catering group that's kind of coming up with best practices, but this is really, right now, it's just not allowed. And in yellow, it's 25. So we're hoping that we will get more guidance from the administration, and we are working to provide that guidance to the administration. That guidance is just not available yet, but we are working internally, and we do have an internal group that's kind of developing best practices to kind of help the catering and large event industry figure out how things are going to look on the other side of this. Thank you, Sue, for another thank you. Is health inspection required to reopen for closed restaurants? We have not heard that. And I've mentioned in the past that I would think it would be extremely difficult to get enough health inspectors out there to inspect restaurants. So I don't know if it's going to be a requirement before you open, but you could probably expect an inspection shortly after. We have gotten nothing from Department of Ag in terms of requiring an inspection before reopening. Hope probably communicates with them more than once or twice or 3 times a day. So if we do hear anything in that vein, we will let you know. I have not heard anything on that front yet. And then I think we're nearing the end. If no mall opening permitted in yellow unless outside access, would department stores and restaurants with outside entrance access be permitted to open? Thank you, Lisa, for the thank you. I can only read what's in the FAQ document, and the FAQ document says that if you have outside access, that would be permitted in yellow. So yes, if you're a department store, red's no dice. But if you're a department store and you have that outside access, according to the regulations, that could be permitted. Okay. Let's see. Where am I? Thank you, Abby. After we exhaust the P3 and are still not open, are employees entitled to return to unemployment? Yes. And that's one of the items that we've pushed in saying that P3 needs to be fixed, because the whole point of P3 is to pull people off of unemployment. If we're not open after 8 weeks, then we're throwing people back on unemployment. So that's really one of the reasons we need the changes, so the P3 can actually do what the intention was for it to do. Oh, catering questions. The caterer can be cited. If someone hosts a wedding at their home with more than 25 people, the caterer is providing food for consumption so they could be, and we just don't know. Like I said, it's part of the frustration, and I will say it again for maybe the umpteenth time. Guidance comes out, and then they're kind of like, good luck, like figuring that out, and then we're stuck trying to figure it out. I think it's probably worth trying to get some specific information as it comes to catering. A question was asked specifically of Secretary Levine this week about weddings and large events, and she said 25 is the number in yellow, and that was pretty much all she spoke to in terms of that. Is it permissible for takeout food and beer to be eaten outside on licensed grounds? No. The LCB has doubled down on that. They have, if it's part of, even if it's not licensed and it's just part of your property, you could get cited for that. So no, in yellow, they are still saying no outside consumption, even if it's takeout. I would like to use the P3 money to reimburse employees for lost income above what they get from unemployment. but how do I bring them back if we're not allowed to be open anyway? One of the, on the unemployment piece, one of the provisions, and I didn't speak to this before, in the forgiveness is if your employees will not come back because they want to stay on unemployment, that will not be held against you in terms of forgiveness. So there is a form on the document for relief where you can stipulate that, but you do have to make a good faith effort to bring them back from unemployment. If they decline, that will not count against your forgiveness. On Pittsburgh venues, thank you for creating the work group to explore their needs. This will be the last, it will be the last phase of public gatherings. And we will continue to work. I mean, and to that end, we're getting all the information we can, and we're telling you everything we can. And we know that it can be frustrating. And as I said before, we are equally as frustrated, but we will continue to fight to get you the answers that you need. And like I say, John's probably a little better than I am, but we will get back to all of you as you reach out and ask us questions. And some of you have gotten this answer from me where I'm just like, like, you know, that, I don't know, one of those like emojis on your phone, you're like, I don't know. There's a lot of that right now, but hopefully we will know sooner than later. And on that note, I'm brain fried. So I think we can call it a day for this week's webinar. John, any motivational closing thoughts?
I am constantly amazed at how you can process so much information, Melissa, and get it right. It's just amazing. I don't know how you have to be so smart, but I'm glad you're here. So thank you for that. Thanks to everybody on the call. I hope that you get a chance to enjoy some aspect of this holiday weekend. I know it's kind of hard for everybody, but we appreciate your support. We appreciate the kind words, and we'll do everything we can to help. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, everyone. We will get a recording of this out, and we do transcribe most of the chat and put them out on our FAQs. With that, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, John. And thank you, Eric, for your setting this up. And I hope everybody has a great week.